The next topic that we're going to be covering is how we can customize the editor with your own block theme styles. So what exactly are custom block styles? Custom block styles allow theme developers to extend the appearance of existing blocks. These can either be core or custom blocks in the WordPress Block Editor. You'll offer users additional styling options directly in the block editor. These styles can be selected by users to apply different visual variations to a block without modifying its structure or content. In simpler terms, custom block styles will give users more ways to visually customize blocks within the WordPress Block Editor, making it easier to adapt blocks to your theme's design without having to touch the block's core functionality. How do custom block styles work? When a theme or plugin registers a custom block style, it adds a new visual option that users can select in the block editor. For example, you can create a custom style for the heading block, and that style might change the color, the font size, or any other design aspects when it's applied. Key points to consider are custom block styles do not alter content. They are purely visual. They do not change the block's content or functionality. They allow for user customization. Users can easily select from multiple predefined styles directly in the block editor. And they are used for theme-specific styling. Styles are generally tied to a theme's design, which allows for a more tailored experience. So in summary, key benefits are that they are quick and easy. Users don't need to write custom CSS, they can just select from a predefined style. They're theme-specific. Custom styles ensure that the designs stay consistent with the theme's aesthetics. They're flexible. Users can still edit content freely while having the option to apply predefined visual styles to enhance their design. Let's jump into WordPress and see how we can go about adding our own custom block styles. Just to make sure you understand what these are, I'll go into posts. I'm going to go into my Hello World post, and you can see that I've added a button here. If we select the button and we go into the style portion, these are custom block styles. So I can easily click to have my button show as filled, or I can show it in outline mode. Having this choice allows the users to not have to worry about styling the button in this way. This is a great method to be able to offer users alternative methods to style certain elements within your theme. Let's go ahead and add some custom styles to our theme. I'll go into Appearance Editor. I'm going to go into the Style area, and I'm going to open the Style book. Keep in mind that the style book is going to show you the default styles that are part of WordPress. From here, I'm going to click Typography, and this is going to show me my default typography settings. We will ultimately be making a custom block style for our heading 2, but we'll start off with something a little more basic at the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and make an alternative style for the quote element. So by default, the quote element is going to display text, and as you can see, it's going to be indented like this. We'll create an alternate style so this can look a little bit different. In order to do this, we're going to have to modify the code that is part of our WordPress theme. So I will jump into my code editor, and I've already loaded the code that is part of this particular theme, and we'll be working within our custom theme folder, modifying some of the existing files as well as adding some new files in order for us to be able to do this. To keep things organized, I'm going to go ahead and create a separate CSS file that will house the CSS that I'll be using for my custom block styles. I'm going to place this CSS inside the Assets folder. The Create Blank theme already made an Assets folder, and this is where our fonts are being housed. I'll create a subdirectory inside of the Assets folder. I'm just going to call this CSS, and inside this folder, I'm going to make a new file, and we'll call this block-styles.css. We'll come back to this file in just a moment. Before we add our CSS, we're going to go to a functions file and make sure that this is in queued so it gets loaded into WordPress. Currently, I don't have a functions.php file, so I'm just going to make one in my root directory. I'll need to start off by making an opening PHP tag, and then of course, I'll need my closing PHP tag. We'll begin by unqueuing our style.css file. I'm not going to be using that right now, but it is possible that I'll want to use this later, and I generally add this to the beginning of my functions.php file. We've used this code before, but we're using the add action to enqueue scripts. We're going to call an anonymous function, and then we're going to go ahead and bring in our styles. I've added some comments here just to remind you of what these things do. If we save this file and we go to style.css and we add something like changing the background color of the body, if we jump back into the front end portion of our website and refresh our page, you can see that this change is now being processed. This is just verifying that the code that we just added to the functions.php file is working correctly. I don't want to do this, so I'm just going to delete this code and I'll return to functions.php. Now that we have this in place, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some code to load in our blockstyle.css. You'll see that this code is going to look a little bit different. We'll start off by using the add action hook. This, of course, is a WordPress hook, and what it does is it will hook a function into WordPress. We're going to be using the enqueue block assets action. When it runs, this hook will fire when WordPress is enqueuing styles and/or scripts for both the front end or the block editor, which is located in the WP admin. This is useful because we want the CSS to apply consistently to both the site view and to the editor view. Theme block styles is the handle or unique name for the style sheet. We're going to use this handle if we ever need to deregister, dequeue, or set dependencies. Get template directory URI, and then concatenating that with the path to our blockstyle.css file allows WordPress to generate the URL to the style sheet. Keep in mind that get template directory URI returns the URL of your theme's root directory. This will ensure that even if we move our website to another host, this will all still function correctly. The array is where we define dependencies. So if there are other styles that need to be loaded before this one, we would put that information here. But in this case, it's just an empty array, meaning that there are no dependencies. The last line of code we have here, file time, this gets the last modified time of the file on the server. We're kind of using it here as a version number of the style sheet. This allows us to bust browser caching, which will automatically fire whenever the file changes. This ensures that the user always gets the latest styles. Now that we have that here, we'll be able to use our blockstyles.css. Before we can add any styles, we're going to need to add some more code to our functions.php file. What we need to do is we need to register a custom block style for our quote block. So let's do that next. I always like to make comments just so that I can remind myself what this code is being used for. I'll add the code and then I'll break it down for you. We're using our add action hook, which will hook our function into WordPress, and we're passing in the init action. Init runs early in the WordPress load process. This is ideal for registering things like post types, taxonomies, or in this case, block styles. Register block style registers a custom visual style, not a new block, but a custom visual style for the core quote block. Users will be able to select the style in the block editor under the styles section of the quote block. The array contains the style properties. So we are going to assign a name of fancy quote. This is a unique slug identifier for this custom style. WordPress is going to use this to generate its own custom CSS class. This is going to allow the class to be added to the quote block whenever the user selects this style. The label of fancy quote is a user-friendly name that's displayed in the block editor UI. The double underscore, open parentheses, and closing parentheses is a function that makes it translatable by providing the string of fancy quote and the text domain VA custom theme, which is the name that we assigned to our theme. That's what we did right here in our style.css file. This next line of code right here is telling WordPress which CSS file that's already enqueued in the theme contains the styles for this custom block style. It has to match the handle that we used in the WP enqueue style. So if we come up here, here's our WP enqueue style, and you can see we use the name of theme block styles. Once again, we're repeating that name here. I'll go ahead and save my functions file. We'll return to WordPress. And before I refresh my page, I just wanted to show you what a regular quote looks like. So I entered this quote onto the sample page. It says, this is a special quote. If we look at this element in the inspector, you will see that this is a paragraph. It is nested inside of a block quote element that has a class of WP block quote. It has another class of isStyleDefault, and then additional classes of isLayoutFlow and WP block quote isLayoutFlow. This is the default way that we can use a quote within WordPress. Now let's go ahead and let's modify this page. I'll jump into WordPress, I'll go to Pages, and this example is on my sample page. So you can see that I have this text that says, this is a special quote. If we open List View, you'll see that this paragraph is nested inside of the quote element. If we look at the quote element, we have several styles here. The first two, default and plain, are what come with WordPress by default. But now we have this new one called fancy quote. So if I apply fancy quote, we're not going to see a change occurring here in the editor because we have not yet made any CSS that styles this in a different way. But if we save the page and we come back out to the front end and we refresh, and once again, if we inspect this element, you're going to see that now it has a new class of isStyleFancyQuote. Knowing that, we can use that as a hook for our CSS. So let's go back to the backend portion of WordPress. I'm going to go into my blockstyles.css file that we just made, and we'll add some additional code. I'll go ahead and use the class of isStyleFancyQuote, and then we'll go ahead and specify the changes that we want. So I'm going to go ahead and set the font family, font style, we'll set the color, some padding on the left, and we're going to add border on the left as well. Now that I have these values plugged in, I'm going to save this, and if we return to the front end portion of WordPress and refresh our page, you're going to see that the quote has now been styled in this particular way. I'll refresh the backend part of WordPress as well, and you can see that the styles that we applied are going to show up here as well. Let's go ahead and let's just add another quote somewhere else on our page. If I select the quote element, by default, it is using the default style. If we go to plain, plain doesn't really change because there is no CSS that's being applied. But if we pick our fancy quote, you can see that this is going to update with the styles that we just specified in our fancy quote. As you can see, this is extremely useful because we now have the ability to add built-in styles. So what I'm going to do next is I want to use this Sacramento text, but I really want it to only display on H2s that are my blog entries. I don't want it to display on all of H2s. So currently, this is being controlled by styles that we set globally in our editor. If you go to the editor and you go to styles and we go to typography and then to headings, you'll see that we globally set in an earlier exercise all headings to display as Roboto. H1s are also displaying as Roboto, but H2s are displaying as Sacramento. H3s and 4, 5, and 6 are using the default, which is Roboto. So if I want to change my H2 back to default, you would think that you could come in here and select default. Unfortunately, because of how WordPress functions, this is now hard-coded into our theme.json file. So in order for us to remove this functionality from the default H2s of our website, we're going to need to modify our theme.json file. I'll go back to my code. We're going to go into theme.json and we're going to find the location where that is specified. So if we scroll down where our font families are specified, this is just loading the different fonts that we're using within our project. So we have Sacramento, we have Alice, and we have Roboto. We don't want to change any of those things, but if we scroll down a little bit more and we find the rules that are targeting the elements, for instance, H1s and H2s, you can see that H1 has been set to Roboto, H2 has been set to Sacramento, and we also specified some font sizes on both of these. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get rid of these lines of code so that this will reset the H1 and the H2 back to their default settings. So I'm going to select this entire block of code right here. I'll hit delete. We'll save this file. And now if we go back to WordPress and refresh our page, you're going to see that some of the sizing has disappeared. And at this point, if we go to H1, it's set to default. If we go to H2, it's still set to Sacramento, but now I can set it back to default. So now the H2s are using the default font, which is Roboto. For the most part, this is how I want H2s to appear. However, when I'm showing my specific blog titles, I want those to display as Sacramento. So in order to do this, we need to modify our template file. I'm going to just review these changes and save the updates. We'll go into templates, and currently we only have this index template. We'll be working on some of the other templates later, but for now, I'm going to open list view. I'm going to open the group, access the query loop, and find my post title. So here is my post title. I'm going to select the post title. We'll come to styles. We'll make sure that these are displaying as H2s, which they are. And at this point, we want to make a modification so we can easily apply the Sacramento styling that we want for these specific H2s. Once again, we're going to need to create some code in order to do this. So I'll return to my code editor. I'm now going to go back into functions.php, and we're going to go ahead and create something that's similar to what we did for our fancy quote. I'll start off with a comment that's just reminding me what this is being used for. So I'm going to register a custom style for the core block of fancy H2. For the most part, I'm using the exact same code that we used before. This first line of code is using add action to hook our function into WordPress's initialization action. Register block style is going to allow us to register this. We are now targeting the block name of core heading. This is the name of the block that we want to apply the style to. In this case, it's referring to the heading block. We're going to go ahead and assign a unique identifier of fancy H2 style. And then we're setting the label to also be fancy H2 style, which will allow users to see the name of the style. At this point, I need to create some CSS, so we will save our functions file. I'll go into blockstyles.css. I'll make a comment. I'll go ahead and begin by setting the class name that I want to target. In this case, this is going to be isStyle fancy H2 style. This name is coming directly from the fancy H2 style that we defined in our functions file. Now all I need to do is create my CSS, so I'll do that next. I'm going to first request Sacramento, and if that is not available, we'll default back to Roboto, and then we'll just leave a catch-all of sans serif. I'll set my font size to be 2.8 rems. We'll specify the color, and I'll define that to be a teal color, which is one of our base colors for this particular theme. I'm going to save this, and now if we return to WordPress, I'll go into my templates and click on index, and we're going to go ahead and go into list view. I will go into group, query loop, post template, group, and find the title. The title is currently registering as an H2. If I go to styles, I'm not going to see my custom block style yet, and that's because we need to modify this a little bit. Let me just show you. If I add a heading and it's an H2, I will have the fancy style available. So this is working correctly on H2s. Why isn't it working on this H2? It's because this H2 is not a heading, it's a post title. So we're going to need to modify our code slightly so that this will be available for regular H2s and for post titles. Let's go back into our code editor. I'll return to my functions.php file. And because we've already registered the fancy H2 style for the core headings, what we're going to do is we're going to reuse the same CSS and the style slug. We're just going to register it for both blocks. So what we'll need to do here is just slightly modify our code. I'm going to go ahead and wrap the register block style inside of a for each loop. We're going to place that right before the register block style. So I'll go ahead and type for each. We'll follow this by parentheses, and then inside the parentheses, we're going to use square braces. We're going to write core/heading, comma, core/post title as block. We're going to open a set of curly braces. Then we need to register our block style. And then instead of using core heading here for the block name, we're going to type $block followed by a comma. Then we're going to need to create an array. I'll open parentheses, and we're going to have to close the parentheses in just a second. Inside of the array, I'm going to have my name, and we'll go ahead and set this to fancy H2 style, which will be the unique slug. The label is still going to be exactly the same. And then we're going to add a new style handle, and we'll change this square brace to a parenthesis. We're going to need to have our closing parenthesis for the register block style. And then we need to create one more set of curly braces, which is the closing curly brace for our for each loop. And then, of course, we have our closing curly brace and parenthesis for the function itself. So what's happening here is the for each is going to loop over an array containing two strings, core headings and core post title. Block will first be core heading, and then it will be core post title. This saves us from having to write the register block style function twice. Keep in mind that register block style is the main function that registers the custom style for each block. There's one per loop iteration. So inside our array, we're defining a name, which is a unique slug that identifies this custom style internally, the label, which is a human readable name, which will be shown in the block editor, and the style handle, which tells WordPress which CSS file contains the style definition. So in essence, for each of these blocks, register a style called fancy H2 style, display it as fancy H2 style, and then get the style rules from the CSS file and queued with the handle of theme block styles. Let's save this. I'll go back to WordPress and we're going to refresh our page here. It's going to lose our regular heading, but I'm not terribly worried about that. Now, if we go into list view and find our post title and go to our CSS, you can see that we have our fancy H2 styles. So if I apply this to the query loop, all of my post titles are going to take on this new style. Let's just save this. We'll go back into the front end portion of WordPress and I'm going to refresh, and you're going to notice that all of these H2s, everything except for our post titles, are going to now be updated. So these change back to use the default font family of Roboto. And if we go ahead and go to one of the pages that has our posts, which in this case is just my default homepage, you can see that all of the post titles, which are H2s, are going to be styled with the Sacramento font, but only those H2s. So there's other instances of H2s that are being used throughout my page, and they are not taking on that particular style. Only the H2s that meet the criteria that we specified are going to get the class of is style fancy H2 style and then be styled in this way. So as you can see, custom block styles are visual variations that you can add to blocks, which gives users more design flexibility. We will use the register block style function to register these custom styles for any block type. And then we're going to create custom CSS to define the visual look of these styles. And then the styles are easily applied by selecting a button or an option in the editor. I think you'll find all sorts of uses for the custom block styles. They really are a great feature of WordPress, and I love to incorporate them into my custom themes so I can give the WordPress admin options to style these things in different ways.